morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 37 of the Blowback Roundtable. We have a special guest today. Alex Suarez is coming from. Where are you at right now, Alex? I didn't even ask.
That's okay. I'm in Jacksonville, Florida.
Jacksonville, Florida. That's great. So we invited Alex on because we wanted to hear specifically about the issue in with Venezuela and Guyana. I think I tried to pronounce that right. Guyana. There's a lot of different ways people are mispronouncing it, but so he's a longtime activist and writer. He's written several books, but he definitely has some insights and expertise on the situation. We were hoping to just learn from him. But there's really a lot going on, around the world. Obviously, the U.S. is in terminal decline. The title of our episode today is "Resource Wars Extend the U.S." And we can see that everywhere we look. But we were gonna start out by sharing this video clip of a Pentagon spokesperson or a Pentagon official, just kind of describing, all the different resources and the abundant natural wealth that is in the Venezuelan Guyana area.
She's called Laura Richardson, and she's a general, and she's the head of Southcom, which is the U.S. That region, and just salivating over resources to get the ball rolling with Alex, who is really what we could call close to an expert to Central and Latin American things.
So let's pop this up and let's see what this woman. I'm sure she has the best interest of the Guyanese and the Venezuelans at heart, right? So I'm sure she's her heart's gonna really go out to those people that she wants to develop that community. So let's see what she says.
Obviously, half of this was this week, but it's more of a cut together thing. Enjoy.
I like to refer to the Western Hemisphere as our neighborhood.
Sweet
crude discovered off of Guyana over a year ago. All of the resources. This hemisphere is very rich in natural resources. This region is so rich in resources. You have Venezuela's resources as well with oil, copper, gold, reserves of heavy crude oil, light, sweet crude that was discovered off the shores of Guyana, rare earth minerals, 60% of the world's lithium in the lithium triangle, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile. 8 countries have the Amazon in these countries. This region matters with all of its rich resources. You've got the lithium triangle, 60% of the world's lithium, heavy crude, light crude, earth element, the Amazon, 31% of the world's fresh water, rare earth elements, lithium triangle, 60% of the world's lithium is in this region, copper, gold. The resources are so rich, and rare earth elements. Lithium, the lithium triangle is in this region. 60% of the world's lithium is in the lithium triangle, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile. We have 31% of the world's fresh water in this region. The largest oil reserves. I like to refer to the Western Hemisphere as our neighborhood.
You get the gist of it. She's been doing this for a while.
Could I respond?
After we've done a basic reading of Guyana, Venezuela, why don't you just launch us into the current, most recent event?
Oh, right now?
Go ahead. Can we get the image off? Oh, there we go.
Can't stand the look of her, right? The face of empire. Yeah. She doesn't realize, maybe because of her imperial arrogance, how insulting it is to us Latin Americans to be called the neighborhood, or even worse, the backyard. For example, John Kerry, back when he was Secretary of State, had called Bolivia the backyard of the United States. And Bolivia, which at the time was under the socialist government of Morales, was so indignant by that statement that they expelled the U.S. ambassador. And the interesting about Bolivia is there's an abundance of lithium in the country. And not to get too off topic, but there actually is lithium also in the former eastern provinces of Ukraine. But Elon Musk, for example, right? There's people that like him on the left. There's people that dislike him on the left. There's the argument in both ways that you can say, okay, there's more free speech on Twitter than Facebook. But something that's bad about Elon
we can do whoever we want.
Well, exactly. When he said in the tweet, when they said, "Hey, you're trying to back the coup in Bolivia to extract their lithium for your electronic cars," and he said, "We can do whatever we want." So that showed clear that by his own admission that he was working with the U.S. government involved in that. And of course, that coup was reversed when Añez was arrested as the criminal that she is, and now there's a socialist in power again, an ally of Evo Morales, Luis Arce. So the Bolivians can recover that lithium. But the fact that there's rich minerals and lithium and oil in the Essequibo region of Guyana that's disputed with Venezuela, that's been disputed for a long time, that could be a motive as well why the U.S. is sending trainers right now into Guyana to back the military there, because they're trying to protect those resources.
And air patrols. That just happened a couple of days ago. It was announced.
Right.
Air patrols to secure. Yeah.
Air patrols as well. And Brazil are afraid that the conflict could get on their border, which borders both Guyana and Venezuela, and they sent troops to the border. They've been neutral thus far, although Lula is pretty friendly with Maduro. But yeah, this is a potential conflict that could spread in the region. And I believe the United States has provoked this, that they're trying to turn this potential war into a proxy war using Guyana as a client regime against Venezuela and the Bolivarian Revolution of Venezuela. And I'd like to go into a brief analysis in history to give it a better context so people can better understand what's going on.
I was going to ask you. Yes, please.
So you got to go back to 1830. In the late 1820s, Simón Bolívar, who was the great Venezuelan liberator who liberated several South American and Central American countries from the Spanish Empire in the early 1800s, in the late 1820s, he was expelled by the oligarchs of Venezuela from his own country. And he was suffering from a declining health, and he died in his 40s on the Caribbean coast of Colombia. And the year after his death, he died in 1830. And why do I cite 1831? Because in 1831, that is when the colony of Guyana was started by the British. And that was an agreement between the Venezuelan oligarchs giving over their land in the eastern provinces to the British so that they could make the colonial project. So one of the great things that Simón Bolívar did, one of the very first things he did, was free the slaves. And so that was never reversed again in Venezuela. But it was reversed in Guyana, because Guyana was carved out of Venezuela in order to make a slave colony. Later, when slavery was abolished, they brought in what they called West Indians, people from India. And they were indentured servants. So they were exploited, but not to the level of the African slaves. And so what happened? An elite formed. And so when the British left, it was the West Indians that were the elite, the political elite of Guyana, who were very friendly to the United States, which took over really as an imperial role in the region after the British and the Spaniards left. So Ali is a product. When I say Ali, I'm talking about the president of Guyana. He is a product of that West Indian elite. Now, it's interesting to know that the president prior to him, so he was elected in August of 2020, President Ali. The president prior to him, who was an African Guyanese, Mr. Granger, was in negotiations with Venezuela, and he was about to give some of that land back to Maduro. And what did the United States do? It does what it always does. It meddled in the presidential elections. It put its full weight and backing behind Ali, and suddenly these negotiations were ruptured as soon as he took over. And then provocative moves were made, provocative statements against Venezuela. U.S. trainers came in. There's more now coming in since the tensions have arose. And this is the context that we see today. It's really, since the British presence there in the 1830s, is an attempt to make a counter-revolution, to push back against the gains of the Bolivarian Revolution. Hugo Chavez, who was elected in Venezuela in 1998, represented a continuation of that legacy of Bolivar, making Bolivarian socialism, having through referendum the public rename Venezuela the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. When I was in Venezuela a couple of years ago, as a witness to their electoral process, I was able to see the gravesite in Bolivar and see the great esteem that the Venezuelan people and people from other parts of Latin America have for Bolivar, who also liberated my father's country, mind you, Peru. He liberated several countries.
The sword of Simón Bolívar is a national treasure in Venezuela. Correct me if that's
the
right.
what of Bolivar?
the sword of Simón
Yes, yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. So Maduro, and as well as Chavez have given replicas of Bolivar's sword to heads of state that they honored, that they were allied with, and that sword represents liberty. It's a very important sword, absolutely. And also want to mention another referendum, which the bourgeois press does not talk about, and that referendum, where 2 million Venezuelans, you need to understand, because of the severe U.S. sanctions imposed on Venezuela, very few people are able to travel in that country to the voting booths. A lot of them get on buses because they can't afford the gas to fill their tanks because of the U.S. imposed sanctions. So still, despite all these obstacles, 2 million Venezuelans recently took part in a referendum. And out of 2 million, 95% voted that territory to be returned to Venezuela. So it's not what the media is saying that, oh, dictator Maduro came in, he's going to invade Guyana. No, it was a democratic decision that they're considering. And there hasn't been a war yet. There could be a diplomatic solution as a result. Guyana could give into pressure and return some of that land. But who's preventing that? Who's wanting to make a proxy war out of this? Who's wanting to make another Ukraine, another Taiwan in South America? It's the United States. It's the U.S. empire. And that's what's largely being ignored. There's even American leftists that are, ignorant to the geography and the history of the region that think, oh, this is just the evil Maduro bullying Guyana. No. And I've seen countless interviews of Guyanese saying, we want Venezuela to come to this region. We want to be under their system. We're going to have better health care. We're going to have a better education system. So it's not like Guyana versus Venezuela. It's more like the U.S. imposing this, and it's a problem between governments, not the people. So,
and of course, Shell and ExxonMobil. I mean, there's other interests in the region other than just the peoples and the two things. But the first thing, I mean, these leftists, you're quite right. What they publish is the new map of Venezuela that Maduro published. And they say, the Kamala Harris bit, large country overrunning small country, bad imperialism. And that's it. That's the surface level understanding of what they got. But I just brought up the Wikipedia entry of President Ali. And it's wonderful because he's a progressive civic party or something like that member. And the first, I think, openly Islamic a Muslim leader, yes, first Muslim to hold office. And he finished in a Labour School of Economics, which is in Georgetown, but is affiliated with the Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha, I'm sure I butchered that, University in New Delhi. So yeah, there's a really serious Indian connection that I didn't expect there, and I wouldn't have known were it not for you.
So well, he's part of a wealthy family. I mean, only the wealthy families, only the wealthy West Indians of Guyana could afford to send their children to be at top universities in India. So he's definitely represents the elites and the oligarchs. And just because his party has the name progressive on it, I mean, even Guaido, a far right fake president of Venezuela that was a total puppet of the U.S., his party even claimed to be progressive, right? So that doesn't mean anything to me that the party happens to have that name attached to it.
Yeah.
And by the way, ExxonMobil just recently found the oil. I mean, there's been other things like minerals in Esquibo, but they just
few years, right?
The team found the oil. And so I was kind of debating somebody from Guyana yesterday, although he was more in agreement with us on Dust Show. And I was telling him, I was saying, what would happen if Venezuela didn't go in and ExxonMobil started extracting that oil? Do you think the regular people of Guyana would really benefit? It would only go in the pockets of the elite and the multinationals and the empire. If Venezuela goes in, not only will it help their economy, it'll be mutually beneficial because they'll use that to make infrastructure in the region that the Guyanese people desperately need.
Yeah, I mean, all three Guyanas basically are just extraction colonies to this day. Quite right. But what's good news about it is, do you remember when there was the Bay of Piglets? The U.S. tried to invade Venezuela with a couple of...
It was quite pathetic. That's why they called the Bay of Piglets instead of pigs. Yeah, what they were trying to do from Colombia.
I don't know, 50, 60 commandos, maybe 100, I don't know. But the fishermen, everybody's armed in Venezuela, which is great.
The militias, yes, on the border.
Yeah, they just caught them without even getting to Caracas. And I'm wondering if they really...
They thought they were going to come in as liberators, that they were going to be, received by the Venezuelans as heroes. And then they come in and they found out, actually, Maduro's pretty popular here. We got stopped right at the border.
I mean, I'm just wondering how they think this is going to happen. Now that, Ukraine is definitely ended, it looks like, from the news. I wonder how they think this will play out.
But by the way, Venezuela is a country that believes in diplomacy. I know that firsthand. When I was there 2 years ago, I met the wife of a hero of mine, Alex Suarez. Alex Suarez is a Venezuelan diplomat who was captured by the Trump regime in June of 2020 on Cape Verde Island, conducting diplomatic business to fight U.S. sanctions, going to an allied country, Iran. And when he
To
made
get
a stop
food.
over there, right, to get food, medicine, oil, things that the Venezuelan people needed because of these illegal sanctions. And so when he was stopping over in Cape Verde, they captured him, they tortured him. U.S. agents did that, and they eventually, under Biden regime, extradited him, what they called the second kidnapping, el segundo secuestro. They extradited him to Miami on a trumped-up charge, and I went to witness his hearing. I've been a supporter of his. I got to meet his wife when I went down to Venezuela, very brave woman who's raising their young children. But yeah, I mean, Venezuela is a country that believes in diplomacy, that believes in unity. It's not a country that believes in war. It believes in liberating and freeing people. So I'm sure a diplomatic solution could be reached. Who's been preventing this? The U.S. and Ali, who's following U.S. orders, who represents the elites of the country. It's important to understand that.
Yeah, who requested the U.S. base there? Was that Ali? Because that was the news that.
I don't think it was Granger, because Granger seemed to be to the left of Ali, and he was negotiating with Venezuela. So it probably was Ali.
Yeah. Okay.
It seems very, very similar to how the U.S. empire is dealing with the South China Sea issue. There's, a point of contention between the Philippines and China, Vietnam and China, Indonesia and China. And the U.S. just wants to stir the pot. They don't want a diplomatic solution. They want to use the Philippines now as their, proxy against China. And so they're pushing the issue, and they got their president in power in the Philippines, and that's what they're doing. It's insidious. It's disgusting. It is not in the best interest of the Philippines. It's obviously not in the best interest of the Guyanese. But
one
it's
of the few countries in the Pacific that's not under the U.S. sphere of influence and it's a Muslim majority country. It neighbors Indonesia and the Philippines. It's Malaysia. Malaysia has actually been very supportive of the Palestinians. I would say even more so than Pakistan. And part of the reason why Pakistan's kind of reversed their support of the Palestinians is because Khan, in a parliamentary coup, of course backed by the United States, was removed from office. And Khan was a pretty decent president. You might remember when Assange had that show on RT from the Ecuadorian embassy, he actually interviewed Khan, and Khan had benefited from WikiLeaks revelations because they showed he was the only non-corrupt guy. Like, they showed the other candidates that were running against him at the time were all caught up in corruption. And so this guy who was principled, who was trying to do business with Russia, after Russia went into Ukraine, they ended up doing a coup against him. And this is what they do. But Malaysia could be the next place in that area of the world where there could be a coup.
Yeah. I mean, also Imran Khan was insanely popular. I mean,
yes,
if you look at some of his rallies where he said the "Are we your slaves?" speech.
That's right.
Which
I was trying to think of the quote. We are not your slaves is what it is.
He's right, because they treat Modi quite different. Right, because they treat India quite different than Pakistan. They let Modi conduct business with Russia. But why are they doing this to Pakistan? Is it Islamophobia? Who knows? But he made some good points.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, someone that popular, they can just kind of shrug under the rug.
Well, there's massive repression, right? The coup resulted in, thousands of people being rounded up. So that was the only way they were able to transition, really, is to repress his supporters.
Yeah. I mean, they're still joining. I think they requested officially to join the BRICS. So there's some real interest at play, but they definitely wanted Imran out. I think he is forcing.
Go ahead.
Sorry, you're next. But the unfortunate timing, wasn't he in Moscow talking to Vladimir Putin about something on the 24th of February, 2022, like immediately on the day of the SMO launching? I think he was in Moscow.
Imran Khan?
Imran Khan, yes.
Okay,
before he was ousted.
It's interesting.
I don't remember if he was, but I do know that he was in business with Russia. He was going to make an oil deal with them because Russia was going to start to sell more to the east because of the sanctions. And the United States didn't like that, and they tried to pressure Khan to stop that. And then Khan exposed what was going on in a press conference, and that's really when the clock started, for the coup against him.
Yeah, I mean, still huge. You're next, Billy Bob. What do you call it? Belt and Road country, Pakistan, like a huge beneficiary as opposed to India. By the way, the border, that little border nation, Nepal, is also thinking of joining the beneficiaries of it.
Joining with BRICS?
This isn't BRICS. This isn't Belt and Road.
Oh, yeah. I got to look more of that up, too. Yeah.
Yeah, the U.S. is just trying to do its best to, keep these governments, keeping them out of China's orbit, forcing them to stay in the orbit of the West, and they're willing to, regime change and put all of their, their power behind color revolutions, rigged elections, or just outright coups, and they're willing to do it. So they want to turn Guyana. I was just thinking they want to turn Guyana into like a modern Nigeria. So Nigeria has so much, oil wealth, and it doesn't benefit the people. Like the literacy rate a couple years ago was like 60%. Like almost half the people in Nigeria couldn't even read. And they're so wealthy, and all that wealth gets extracted. The U.S. props up a little comprador government that, facilitates the wealth extraction, and the government benefits, the cronies benefit, but the people get screwed. And that's exactly what would happen in Guyana. It would be way better for the Guyanese people if the Venezuelans, created a state. And, if the Venezuelan government was not a government of, by, and for the people, the U.S. would have a completely different position to take on the issue.
I also want to
only that-
mention
Yeah.
something about Nigeria. They actually threatened, a lot of people forget this, they actually threatened to make collective punishment against Niger for throwing out the French. They said, we're going to cut your electricity. That's like Israeli level threat right there. I mean, that's how much of a sellout they are. They had to reverse back from that because the African Union said, you can't do that. But, the fact that Nigeria even made that threat at that time really shows what a sellout regime's in power there.
Yeah, and there was this
the Chicago school.
There was this big invasion force ready to go on the border. We heard it for months, and then sort of slowly everything went quiet and nothing happened. And now Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, they're in like I forgot the word, but Carla remembers it from the last episode.
But they're an alliance,
and there's kind
federation,
a confederation,
Confederation.
I don't know what.
The Sahel Confederation, amazing stuff. So I think what the US really is trying to do everywhere, but like patching holes one after the other. Ukraine down, Gaza, there's a problem. Now there's Guyana, and there might be something in the South Pacific. It's trying to stop time, trying to make it tick backwards because
people are having selecting amnesia, But yeah, I mean, it's important to understand Nigeria is a total sellout regime. It's a big country in Africa, but it was kept back by the military alliance and by the African Union saying, "Hey, you can't do this. You can't make threats like that." So they couldn't implement the threat.
Yeah. Now Tinubu, I guess he's the president of Nigeria. He's dug a deep hole for himself in the debt world, and there's a lot of unrest in Nigeria right now.
Ebola Tinubu. Same's going to happen to Mr. Javier Milei, right?
He's probably going to do another neoliberal move with more IMF loans, and then when he's voted out and a more progressive president comes in, they're going to blame it on them. It just keeps repeating itself.
How do we get out of an IMF debt? We're gonna get more IMF loans. That seems to be his.
Who was the first person to pay off the Argentine IMF debt? Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez completely paid off the IMF debt that Argentina had because there was an oil boom at the time. He could afford to do it. And he did it in exchange for Argentine cattle that was sent to Venezuela. Probably the deal was more beneficial for Argentina than for Venezuela, but Venezuela is very important to be in solidarity with allied countries in the region. Chavez was hated by the IMF, detested by the imperialists for doing moves like this.
Was that under the Kirchner?
Yes, that was under Kirchner's government, and his wife became president after he passed away, and she was the vice president of the prior government. But now this nutcase Milei, who cloned his dog, he literally cloned his dog. That's how crazy he is. He has money to clone his dog. He's an elite, nutcase who just wants to privatize everything. He wants to change everything to the dollar. Just be as much sellout as he can. And this is what happens when the leftists stop acting like leftists. When the left becomes demoralized and tries to be more moderate, people don't go out to vote. And then who ends up voting for the next candidate? Right-wingers or people that are apolitical and ignorant and think Milei is going to be some great guy. And that's what happened.
That's true. It's a dead dog, and he still takes, I think, political advice from him, which kind of shows.
He said that. He takes advice from his dog. I know Spanish, and that's exactly what he said. He's insane.
It's not just that he's insane. It's that he is, he is taking a side in the, the big geopolitical struggle between, the empire and the anti-hegemonic forces. And he's saying, we're going to We're going to end our relationship with China, and we're going to get closer to the U.S. We're going to adopt the dollar as our currency. I mean, he's such a sellout to think that, you know, libertarians and
anarcho-capitalist, I think that's his.
You know, yeah, or anarchists at all think that he's gonna, you know, he's some kind of a good thing. I mean, they're delusional.
I consider it a contradiction to say you're a narco-capitalist. I'm a socialist, but
No, of course.
I consider
Absolutely
it
is.
a contradiction.
Absolutely
And, you know, small countries, to be fair, small countries like Ecuador and Panama, when they transitioned to the dollar, it did help their economy that were in crisis. The problem is Argentina is literally the largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. It's larger than Spain. It's a massive country. To make a radical transition like that from the Argentine peso to the U.S. dollar would be disastrous for their economy.
And you just told,
yeah. Go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
and you just told me, which I'm shocked by, that at one point it was debt free, thanks to Hugo Chavez. It was debt free.
Absolutely. Nor Kirchner nor his wife took a single IMF loan after that. It wasn't until Macri, the right winger, that they started the IMF loans again, which of course they blamed on the progressive Fernandez later who took over. But it's the right, whenever they take over, they get these neoliberal loans and mess up their economy.
Yeah, the right is interested in putting forth the idea that government can't work. The government can't work for you. And so they're happy to break it. They're happy to run up all this debt and say, oh, look, you know, the government is the problem. And then what? That just elevates the political capital of the wealthy elites, and they can, you know, they can be the new powerful bloc if there's no government to, you know, to keep them in check. But I mean, yeah.
And those monies on these IMF and World Bank loans, they go to mostly U.S. corporations who under contract to do some kind of development in the host country, and then they, like we learned in Iraq, they don't do much of anything if they can get away with it.
Yeah, they plant a tree and they call it a school or something, and it's done.
Yeah.
So who wrote Economic Hitman? I mean, he wrote the book on it. I forget that guy's name. Confessions of an
I heard about that. I don't remember his name either, but I heard about that book. Yeah.
I mean,
he went to Latin America basically to threaten leaders to take loans. He was working as a gangster for the U.S. government, and he actually had a crisis of conscience and wrote that book revealing what he actually did.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, you know, it's a very, it's one of the most used tool of imperialism is, you know, it's economic warfare. It's economic aggression.
John Perkins was the name.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Confessions of an Economic Hitman, I think, is the name of the book. Yes,
yeah. It is. He did some fantastic interviews too.
And he explains, you know, when these governments that he tries to first bribe and then coerce, if they continue to resist and, you know, really actually represent the people, then you just bring in, they call them the jackals, you know, the assassination squads, the death squads, and that's how it goes. But so I think Chavez was assassinated. I mean, I absolutely believe that, you know, there was some way in which they were able to give him. And a lot of people came down with cancer. Lula came down with cancer, too, right around the same time.
Not only Lula, Fidel Castro, when he was on a state visit to Argentina, ate some food and suddenly got stomach cancer. So many leaders got mysterious cancers. And then what a coincidence, right? That all these right-wing leaders, they're healthy. None of them are getting cancer in office at that time. Yeah. But all these left leaders that are going against the U.S. empire, they're all getting weird forms of cancer. I wouldn't be surprised if the CIA was involved.
No, me neither. He did bigger crimes. He went to the UN. He said, I still smell the sulfur from the great Satan, which was at the time George W. Bush.
Bush the second, yes.
The younger one, yeah. Amazing character.
He
was larger than life.
Yeah. What he was able to do, though, was get the military. Too. What's that?
I got to go to his gravesite, too, when I was in Venezuela, of Chavez.
One of the best things he did, though, was to make sure the military was on the side of the people. And because without him doing that, you know, they wouldn't have lasted. Like they would have already been, you know, Guaido would be the new president or whoever they wanted. But because the military was on the side of the people, that coup that they tried against him was not successful. And I mean, that's a lesson because in Bolivia, you know, that wasn't the case for Morales. Like he didn't have control of his military. So that's why, he got ousted.
Well,
But
Chavez came for the military. That was the brilliance of their revolution, that they politicized the military, and they learned this from what happened in Chile, because in 1973, 25 years prior to the election of Chavez, the coup in Chile showed how the military sold out to the United States and did the coup against the democratically elected socialist Allende there.
Yeah.
And yes, in Bolivia, unfortunately, they did not politicize the military either, and it resulted in that coup, which has since then been reversed, luckily. But just tell you about Guaido real quick. Guaido's only a couple years older than me. He's in his early 40s. I think he would have been too young when they did the first coup attempt against Chavez, which was in 2002. But a lot of people don't realize how close they were to killing him. Chavez was taken to an island where he was going to be shot, and he was taking off his jewelry. He was ready to be executed. He was ready to die. And all of a sudden, his battalion, the helicopter battalion, came in on the island and said, "There's 1 million people at the presidential palace. They're about to take over. We need to bring him back." And so the military backed off and let him be taken. But literally, they were bringing a priest for him to give his last confession before he was going to be executed. And just within minutes, they were able to fly him back. And when I was at the gravesite of Chavez, I was overlooking the presidential palace, and I was with my guide. And I asked her, "Where were you that day in 2002?" She says, "I was there with the people." So that was pretty emotional, that I was speaking to somebody that was there at that moment in history. But it was the people that demanded Chavez be returned. And the people didn't believe the lies of the media, which to this day is run by the bourgeoisie in Venezuela. There's very few state media. The media is very hostile to Maduro. Some dictatorship, right, where most of your media is run by the opposition. But, the people saw through the lies, and they came out in support of Chavez and reversed the coup in defiance of the U.S. empire. And that changed history forever.
There were barely any newsreels. I mean, I heard there was lots and lots of people overrunning the palace, but I had no idea he was that close to basically execution, to death. Amazing.
I know I've promoted before the documentary, the Revolution Will Not Be Televised. So there was actually some Irish documentarians in Venezuela that just happened to be there right when the coup was going down. They took a lot of great footage. One of the most poignant pieces of footage from that documentary was just outside the palace. And one of these soldiers in the palace was like, he was just expressing his solidarity with the people. And that really got to me emotionally. Like that's what it's all about. Like, thank fucking God the military was not a fucking tool of the bourgeoisie, who were so happy to abolish all the institutions, all the democratic institutions that Chavez had put in place. And I mean, they were just.
And the white elite, a lot of them fled to Colombia, which was a sellout regime back then. Now Colombia is more friendly with Venezuela. But something I want to mention that I witnessed firsthand when I was going to the voting booths, I noticed military police there. And there was times where military police escorted us, and I actually felt very safe. I've never felt safe in the presence of police in my own country. And I talked to the people about this. I said, "Do you feel threatened by them? Is there any?" Because it was very open and transparent. You could talk to anybody as an observer. And they said, "No, they're here to protect us from the white elite mobs that would come and beat us up if they weren't here, that prevent us from voting." And they said, "This is part of La Unión Cívico-Militar, which means it's the civic military unity." So they feel protected by the military, who are actually protecting the working class, not protecting the elite, the military police, like they would here in the U.S. empire. This is what a lot of American leftists don't understand. They talk about, police brutality in Venezuela against protesters. These are protesters that were throwing Molotov cocktails at the police. And like in any country, the police had to have responded to defend themselves. That's a completely different scenario than the tear gassing that I had to put up with here in Jacksonville 3 years ago for peacefully protesting for Black lives. That's a completely different scenario than what's going on in Venezuela.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem with leftism today. It's like they see things as it's authoritarianism versus freedom, whatever the fuck freedom means. But they forget that there's the class nature of the ruling party is what matters. And so a police of, for, and by the people are going to be different than a police of, for, and by the wealthy elite psychopaths. I mean, it's two fucking different things, and you're conflating two entirely different things because you're stupid. Sorry. All right.
and there's NGOs behind all of these groups that protest in these countries, and they all can be sourced here in the from the United States. That's where the money comes from.
Paid for by the billionaires. Yeah.
Right? They take photographs of themselves and State Department officials right outside the State Department. And people don't get it. It's
You know where Guaido
That's
went to
true.
school? Guaido was educated at Georgetown University
yeah,
In Guyana.
DC, which is down the street from the State Department, which you know
Right.
is heavily infiltrated by the CIA. They were
It's in-
probably grooming him from day one.
it's in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
And just look at the full circle. I think he now teaches at
Yeah.
the Miami International School, mid-level something. Yeah, he's just ousted
Yeah,
one
it's
of
funny
my,
because him and Bolsonaro both fled to Florida around the same
Yes,
time.
they did.
Bolsonaro was in Orlando and Guaido's still in Miami. But isn't it funny? They always come to this state. DeSantis is always willing to take the fascists of the world, isn't he?
I am waiting for Zelensky to teach a course on democracy in fucking Miami.
Yeah, send
I'm
Zelensky
waiting.
to Tampa. I mean, get him over here to Florida. I'd love to protest him at his house. I almost went down to Orlando to protest Bolsonaro, but then they sent him back to Brazil. But yeah, why not?
How long is it going to be before he's in fucking Miami? Like that's where the best money is. That's where he's going to end up shortly.
That's the thing.
I
The
think
Russian
Las
oligarchs
Vegas-
in Miami, are the ones that were thrown out by Putin. They
Yeah.
hate Putin. So, I'm no fan of Trump, but when you're attacking somebody unjustly, I'm going to point it out. I'm an independent. So they were saying, oh, yeah, business deals with Russian oligarchs. Now we know he's with Putin. Those are the ones he kicked out. That would be like saying, oh, he met with Cuban exiles in Miami. That means he's a Fidel Castro agent.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So if Zelensky, does business with Russians in Miami, they'd be happy to do business with him because these are the oligarchs that are the sellouts, the ones that Putin threw out in the early 2000s.
Help me, Americans. I know it's Florida, Panhandle, Miami. I know where. Why is that state? Why is that the magnet for these people? Why is it's special?
Maybe they like the weather. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a
climate.
little warmer.
I guess.
They're going into
Equatorial.
an exile instead of Siberia. They're going into a tropical exile.
And
And
it's funny.
obviously, the fascists have a big political presence. The anti-Castro Cuban fascists all move there, so there's strong politics. That's why it's difficult. It's political suicide for any government or any politician to run on supporting Cuba or ending the embargo against Cuba, because Florida is an important swing state, and if you do that, you're going to lose Florida. So it's it's one of those political things, but a lot of political power of fascists. So it's kind of like a magnet.
There's only two countries I ever felt safe in the presence of police, and I've visited several countries, spent some time abroad, and that was Cuba and Venezuela. Because again, the relationship between the police and the working class and the masses of people in those socialist countries is nothing like the United States. So a lot of the people on the American left or even the right, they misunderstand this. They don't understand that interaction is quite different.
No, that's a great point. It's a very important point, and because you just see, it's an anti-authoritarianism. It's an unprincipled anti-authoritarianism that doesn't distinguish between different kinds of authority. Like one authority is repressing the wealthy psychopaths to benefit the working class, and the other is just the opposite. But that's a very important distinction that the left has not understanding.
And the police are more relaxed in Cuba because all the rich have ran out to Miami already. There's still plenty of rich people causing problems in Venezuela, which is a very democratic society. So the police are a little bit on the edge there. But they're on the edge against us, against working class people, and they're on the edge against the elites and what they could do.
That's very interesting. So when were you last in Cuba or Venezuela?
I was in Cuba in 2017 and Venezuela 2 years ago.
So 2 years ago, that was like during COVID?
Yes,
Venezuela?
yes, it was a little complicated. I had to go through Dominican Republic, who had very strict measures at that time. I intend next year to go to the presidential elections, which will probably be in the latter part of next year, and there won't be those restrictions then, so it'll be a little bit easier to travel. Of course, still difficult with the sanctions and everything. You have to go through a third country, but shouldn't be a problem.
So this seems like a very dangerous situation for Maduro. This eagerness by the U.S. to initiate a violent proxy confrontation. So, I mean, I'm certain that Maduro appreciates far more than I am here, or that we are here right now, the gravity of the situation. But obviously, there's going to be a willingness to demand certain rights. And I mean, Venezuela is not going to just surrender because of the threat of a military confrontation, right? Like, what do you
Also,
think?
how many active service members are there in Guyana? And I'm sure you want to talk to a military
It's a
expert on this as
tiny,
well, like Scott Ritter. There's only about 3,000. And
it's
there's
a
over
tiny army.
100,000 last I checked service members of Venezuela. So if it's ground forces, they don't have a chance in hell, even with U.S. Trainers down there. So they're setting them up to fail. And my prediction is probably next year the Ukrainians will be totally defeated. They're going to fail as well. I'm not a military expert, but from what I've studied as well, but just the numbers, right? It comes down to statistics a lot of times in warfare. I'm an historian. I'm not a military historian, but just with my familiarity there. But yeah, Guyana is bound to lose if it comes to a conflict. It would probably be over in days, actually.
Angelo Giuliano, I think, just posted that one of their helicopters went down, Guyanese helicopter, and their fleet was made of two.
I'm sure they went into Venezuelan airspace. They also violate ocean areas in the sea that belong to Venezuela. That's been going on.
True, but the Air Force had 2 helicopters in total.
Yeah, my guess is they went into Venezuelan airspace, and because of the tensions, Venezuela responded. And the Venezuelans are very aware that those helicopters were sent by the United States. This is provocations from the United States. The United States trainers are there on the ground.
For sure.
But they're trying to turn this into a proxy war.
Do you think they're going to float the idea of putting Guyana in NATO?
I wouldn't be surprised if Ali brings that up.
Jesus.
But you see how desperate he is. He was on, what was it, CNN recently? Oh, no, actually, no, he was on Al Jazeera. And the Al Jazeera journalist was good. She was tough with him on his on her questions. And she said, hey, if you're saying you're for peace and stability, then why are you sending troops to the border with Venezuela? And then you could just see how nervous he was getting and how anxious he was and sweating. And, he's probably a nervous wreck right now because he's realizing, wait a minute, you're not fulfilling what you promised me. Because probably the U.S. empire do what they always do, right? Remember what the late Kissinger said? It was actually true. He said, we have no allies, only interests. So they're pretending that he's an ally, saying, oh, yeah, we'll fully back you up. We'll send tanks. Just do this against Venezuela. We fully got you. He did it, right? He didn't continue the negotiations, and now they're abandoning him. They're just sending a few dozen trainers. So he's going to be crushed pretty quickly if it gets into that level.
That's interesting. That's a great point. I remember the country of Georgia and Saakashvili, our puppet there, we got him to do some provocative stuff against Russia. And I remember seeing a photo of him in his office eating his tie because he was nervous as fuck that the Russian tanks weren't going to just stop at the border, which they did. They stopped at the border. They were protecting the enclave of South Ossetia. But he didn't know that. And the U.S. was like, oh, shit, we're not going to fucking go to war over Georgia. Sorry, dude. You fucked up.
Even with natural resources, I mean, Georgia is a small country, much like Guyana is. So, if it was Georgia versus Russia, they wouldn't have a chance in hell. The Ukrainians are still fighting because they're a much larger country. But, yeah, Georgia would have been crushed pretty quickly.
Yeah, but that region, the Caucasus, that's Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. That's where the international north-south corridor is almost built, which will...
Man, I have a question about Azerbaijan that confuses me. I know that they speak a Turkic language and they have good relations with Turkey. They're cousins, basically. But I also heard that the majority of the population are Shia. So are they more friendly with Iran or with Turkey?
Oh, Jesus, I was not prepared for that. I don't know. I know Douglas McGregor says that they understand Erdogan very well because they speak the same Turkic language, and I'm not convinced even that is true. So there's an oil pipeline going from Baku all the way to Turkey, and that feeds Israel, 40% of Israel's needs. So there's that, and it's still pumping. It goes onto a ship in a Turkish port and then into Haifa. And that didn't stop, even though you've seen Erdogan being very aggressive against Netanyahu, not the country, but Netanyahu, absolutely. And in the background, there are these deals. So it seems to be leaning very Turkish.
Well, did you hear about I think it was Richard Medhurst who first revealed this. He's very respected among the left.
He's amazing.
The Ben Gurion Canal that they want to potentially build in Gaza, and that they also found oil off the coast of Gaza. It would rival the Suez Canal. Yeah. So there's talk of that as well, to push the Palestinians out into the Sinai and then build that canal.
True,
and that was secret, but it was revealed. Maybe that sabotaged the plans now. I don't know.
Yeah, he did a very good. He actually wrote in NEO, the New Economic Outlook journal, and also did a video summary of this energy war thing. He did it way better than me. But the Ben Gurion Canal was secretly planned by the US in the 50s, and it was supposed to use something like 6,000 nuclear bombs to dig it, which is a very, very Israeli way to dig a canal, and it's just to fuck over Egypt, because at the time.
Oh, they hated Nasser. They hated the fact that Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. But if it
Absolutely.
wasn't for who was the president at the time, Eisenhower. If it wasn't for Eisenhower saying no, I'm not going to back the British, French, and Israelis in invading Egypt, they probably would have went through with a full invasion of the country.
Yeah.
But Eisenhower had enough. I mean, you remember in his farewell address before Kennedy took over, he warned us of the military-industrial complex. And even though he was a man of the military, he got fed up with the U.S. being a policeman of the world. But yeah, Egypt came very close to having a full-scale invasion of their country just because Nasser wanted to nationalize their own canal.
True. Yeah.
And the same thing in in Iran, they did a color revolution of Mossadegh because he was going to nationalize the British petroleum oil interest there. That's the driving force of empire, really, is controlling the resources, controlling wealth, controlling markets, and they'll go to war for it. I mean, they'll kill, die, and they lie all day about it. Is there a better way? I mean, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be some kind of improvement to this system. What do we have, Ben? You got it.
I'll show you something that I think sends chills down the spine of the U.S., which, by the way, is an energy-producing nation. So they have oil.
Did I pop it up on the screen?
They have gas. Pop it up on the screen, and I'll hit play. I don't know if you've seen this one.
Sound.
We can't hear it, Ben.
Oh, no sound? I'm sorry.
I can see the subtitles.
I screw this up. You have to switch it again. Okay, sorry about that. Hitting play now.
Putin is now isolated from the world more than he has ever been.
Yeah, that UAE was a very nice welcome committee.
Have you seen that? I've never seen anything like that in my life, like a Hollywood production, not just the jets doing the tricolor. That was, by the way, in the UAE. And
Wow.
horses, camels, salutes, all the shooting. It was absolutely amazing. He was received like a fucking czar. And he did this the last couple
The
of
U.S.
days.
does not get that type of enthusiasm when it visits those countries, that's for sure.
No, I mean, Blinken was stood up in the same place for like 6 or 7 hours. No, that was MBS in Saudi Arabia. And then they had a meeting in the morning or something. And in Doha, Qatar, I think the German president, I always forget, Steinmeier, he was left on the plane for half an hour. There's a picture of him like that at the top of the rail. Like he's
They used to do stuff like that against Fidel Castro. When Fidel Castro came to the UN in New York, they used to hold him up on his plane and stuff. And now they're doing it against the U.S. And something interesting about Belarus, I love that footage of the Belarusian president with Putin. A lot of people say there's nothing left of the Soviet Union. There's no Soviet economy left in the world.
Yes, there is. Yes.
Belarus is what's left, and they're standing up. I have a lot of respect for the Belarusians. They have a socialist-based economy that's Soviet-based, that's still there. That even though Russia's not Soviet Union, they have good relations with their Russian brothers, and they've been very helpful also in the conflict with Ukraine. Minsk? The Minsk agreement was held in Belarus to try to reach a diplomatic solution. They haven't necessarily sent troops, but they've helped at diplomatic levels. It's good that Belarus is there.
The peace talks, the 3 levels of peace talks last year in April, which in the end Boris Johnson just cut in half, that was also held in Belarus. And then the final round would have been in a Turkish city. I'm not sure, Antalya, Ankara, somewhere there. But Boris flew in, said, no, you have to fight. And now we have at least 500,000 Ukrainian dead because of that. But yeah, I love Belarus because it looks
Isn't that ironic, though, that his first name's Russian, Boris?
Yes, Boris Johnson. When it comes to wild hair, you guys, I mean, Latin
I don't know whose
America,
hair worse, Trump's or his.
No, I'm thinking you guys in Latin America, you have Javier Milei. We in Europe have Geert Wilders, the new fucking Dutch idiot with the hair.
Another crazy with the hair. Huh?
Yeah, and another crazy sort of
Yeah, Malay's got a crazy hair.
Zionist libertarian, very similar kind of guy. And yeah, they have Boris Johnson, the joker of the world. But this thing, I mean, these are all going to be, from January 1, the UAE, Egypt, and the Saudis are going to become BRICS countries, you know?
But to be fair, a lot of the Middle Eastern countries have sold out the Palestinians. I mean, you've had stronger statements and stronger moves of recent diplomatic relations ruptured from Latin America in solidarity with the Palestinians than some Arab countries, and Egypt as well. I don't blame this on the Egyptian people. The Egyptian people are highly sympathetic to the Palestinians. I'm talking about the regime. I'm talking about Sisi.
Same.
He's been complicit in the blockade of Gaza.
I'm with you. The Turkish people, the people who are at the rally, 2 million people at the airport, they're ready to go. Unfortunately, you know, politics at the highest level is different. But, you know, if you were Russia, what would you do? Send the Su-55s? No. What you do is diplomacy. And after these 2 visits, once to the UAE, with full Sukhoi 35 escorts, meaning if, you know, the US tries to ground him or something, or shoot at him or does something stupid, they can't. And then over to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and then home, where he met Ibrahim Raisi, the president of Iran. And now all 3, by the way, this was just before the show. I was watching a live stream at the UN. They have approached the Security Council with an urgent plan for a peace, absolute break to the war in Gaza. So what they're doing is diplomacy. But you're right, when it comes to deeds, I mean, nobody beats the Houthis, the Ansar Allah movement in Yemen, as well as, of course, the Palestinians in Gaza.
They actually captured an Israeli vessel. This is amazing what the Yemenis did.
It's a tourist attraction. You can go there and they're doing this thing and dance on it. It really is. It's amazing what those guys are doing.
They're doing it out of solidarity with the Palestinians, which is beautiful. This country that suffered the onslaught of the Saudis. And the Saudis finally withdrew, and their coalition withdrew, and they're just rebuilding the country, and they're like, screw it. If they're going to base again, do it. We're going to capture this vessel out of solidarity with Palestinians. I have a lot of respect for the Yemeni people and for the Houthis and what they're doing.
Amazing. And you know what? There's no state-sponsored let's attack Yemen, because Yemen said, okay, I'm going to destroy all the oil fields of Saudi Arabia, who they fought a 10-year war with, and you know, at the very harsh receiving end. Them, Hezbollah, Hamas, they're the true...
they're the only ones fighting the Zionists right now. There's nobody else. Yeah. And the only one that's a state actor is the Yemenis, because the Houthis are still in power. Hezbollah is a member of parliament, but they're not, you know, the head of the government of Lebanon. And of course, Hamas, they have no state, so they're not part of an official government either.
And who's in the West Bank? That's old Fatah. It's
the
now
Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, they're just a lapdog. They're like,
and actually, they had a poll, and most Palestinians said they wouldn't vote for Hamas or Palestinian Authority in a new election. Who's preventing the election? The United States and Israel. They're the ones preventing any progress from the Palestinians.
They've always opposed a legitimate. That's why they assassinated Arafat, because he was a legitimate popular leader and rather secular, and so they preferred the Islamists because they don't play well in the West. We would
Billy Bob, we have to be careful of how we word that, right? Sure. For example, there's people that are saying that Hamas is run by Israel and that this is all a setup. I'm totally down to believe conspiracies, but I don't believe that. I think what it was is Netanyahu got word from the Egyptians that something big was at play. And because of his arrogance, he didn't believe it. He ignored the warnings. It wasn't that they were working with Hamas for October 7th to happen. But I do believe that there was friendly fire. Hell yeah, a lot of friendly fire from the Israelis that killed other Israelis.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. And of course, there's at least 2 or 3 years of news where Netanyahu says, yes, let's finance Hamas. But it was playing one guy against each other. That's not the same as, So
my theory is that in the 1980s, when Hamas first emerged, by the way, this didn't start in 1987. Okay, that's when Hamas first emerged. I'm older than Hamas. So people that say they started October 7th, they started when Hamas started. No, it goes back at least to 1948 with the formation of Israel. But Hamas, don't tell me I lost my train of thought. We're covering a lot. I probably should have drank more coffee.
That's okay.
You get it back.
Well, you were talking about Hamas didn't just start on October 7th. I
remember now. So in the 1980s, Israel permitted Hamas to emerge because they saw them as a rival against Fatah or the Palestinian Authority. That's not the same thing as running Hamas to this day.
For sure.
So that I don't believe, but I do believe that is true, that Israel kind of backed off and let them merge, this more religious movement because they saw them as a way to, divide and conquer. And it's interesting because I was reading up on the history of slavery in Guyana recently, and they did a divide and conquer as well. What they did was they intentionally split up different tribes from Africa so they couldn't communicate with each other and rebel. But what ended up happening is a Dutch Creole emerged, would mix with English because English came later. Creole meaning mix. They call it patois, much like the language in Jamaica, which is kind of like the Taino indigenous language mixed with English. So they have Guyanese patois, which is what the regular people speak. And then, of course, there's the more sophisticated English that the elites speak, the West Indians, people like Ali. But yeah, it's interesting how they also divided up those slaves.
Yeah. Insidious. Divide and conquer. I mean, that's their MO. They're really good at it. They do it very well. But yeah, I mean, we need to understand their strategies, their machinations, and we need to overcome them. It's easier said than done, for sure. So there's a lot going on. Like we touched on Guyana, we touched on Venezuela, we touched on Ukraine, Israel. So this thing at the UN, I mean, there seems to be a lot of diplomacy, a lot of stuff. It seems like there might be some big news coming out, at least with the UN Security Council resolution being put forth. What do you think is being discussed and planned by, Iran, Russia, China, and the rest of the Arab world? I mean, what exactly is it? Like just another attempt, an effort for another ceasefire?
Force the US to get its attack dog to an actual ceasefire. I think that's absolutely what's in play. By the way, it's the UAE, Russia, and China. They're the sponsors.
And really, it would be to embarrass the U.S. because the U.S. probably would ultimately use their veto. It's kind of to just prove to the world where the U.S. really their position is, because their lip service, right? They're always condemning Israel. Israel, you need to stop being so mean. Meanwhile, they're giving them the bombs, right?
Sometimes in the same headline. Yeah, 2,000 kilo bombs, and we urge you to restrict the civilian deaths.
Here's the logic of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, who refuses to call for a ceasefire, actually voted the right way recently. He voted not to send weapons to Israel. But I'm like, okay, so you don't want them to have the weapons, but you won't say they should stop using the weapons?
Also, how long did it take? 60 days? I mean, for 2 months, he went along with everything that Israel wanted. I was watching Bernie Sanders. It took him 60 days to come around to this. God, that man. Sorry.
But is that essentially what this diplomacy is about? Just to kind of to isolate the U.S., force them to veto and force them to look really condemnable in everybody's eye. I mean, is that the extent of what they're planning? Or are they thinking of maybe, some kind of a military confrontation? I mean, I'm just throwing that out. Is it strictly diplomacy, or are they trying to develop some kind of a coercive force, or is it just diplomacy?
Let me tell you what I would do if I was Sisi. I would send in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of loads of aid through the Rafah border. And if Netanyahu called me up and said, stop this, I would tell him, unless you want to be fighting a war with the Egyptian government as well, you're going to permit these vehicles in. That's what a leader does. And guess what? I bet you Netanyahu would back off because he can't afford to have a war with the Houthis, with Hezbollah, with Hamas, and then with Egypt, who gets a lot of U.S. support as well. What would happen is Netanyahu would talk to the United States and I'd say, look, we're supportive of Egypt too. You need to back off now. Now that Egypt wants to send their military in against you, that's probably what would happen. But because Sisi's a sellout, because you don't have real leaders in a lot of these Middle Eastern countries,
it
keeps going on.
Yeah,
so that's the problem. He's a sellout, and he's really not a representative of his people. If he was a representative of his people, he would have done that a long time ago. Things would be totally different. But the whole reason he's in there is because he's not a representative of the people. He's he represents Western interests.
There's barely any vans getting through for aid. It's symbolic, if anything. It's actually less than what it was before October 7th. If anything, they need more help now. Their infrastructure has been completely destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, they have strong rhetoric, both him and the King of Jordan.
The rhetoric is decent. It's decent rhetoric. That's what else, though? What else do they have? So what I'm thinking, and as I'm talking, I'm thinking about what I think. So, I mentioned, is it just diplomacy? Are they going to put together some kind of a militarily coercive force to try and, threaten militarily? Here's what I think they're going to do. It's going to be oil. They're going to use oil. They're going to use global energy prices as a weapon to put pressure on Israel and on the West.
That's what they did in the 1970s. Remember,
Yeah,
1970s,
exactly.
the Arab oil embargo, that showed the power that they had
Did it-
because they had leaders like Prince Faisal, who wasn't a sellout. If they have real leaders, they can use their resources to pressure the West.
And I think that's what
And
they're
they
about
should.
right now. They're trying to organize, a united front where they can leverage, global energy prices. So I hope they're successful. Venezuela's on board. Venezuela, of course, has a lot. Iran is on board. Russia, Saudi Arabia. So I'm optimistic. I'm hoping that they develop some successful strategy that will bring the West to its knees.
Let me give you two little illustrations, little icons for this whole thing. One was Vladimir Putin was led out to his car, which is rare in diplomacy, not by MBS but by the king of Saudi Arabia, 88 or something, really, really old man. And Putin is also one of the guys, since you mentioned it, I looked it up, who received one of the replicas of Simon Bolivar's sword. So that is, I think,
that was given to him by Hugo Chavez, I believe, before Maduro. But Maduro also has very good relations with Russia.
Yes. I mean, the tide has changed. The Ukraine thing has been dropped in the lap of Europe, and Europe doesn't want it. All of the news is about it. I mean, the Boris Pistorius, the defense minister of Germany, said, well, we're not actually allies, of Ukraine. Not at this point. All of Europe, shit, they're leaving it to us. You've probably heard about the debacle with the funding, the 100 billion out of which 60 billion would have went to Ukraine, right?
Is that in Kazakhstan? Is Baku in Kazakhstan?
Baku is Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan, that's right. I knew it was Central Asia, yeah.
Okay, I'm just saying, you've heard about the funding debacle for Zelensky and Ukraine? I mean,
no, I got to look that up. That sounds interesting.
Well, so I mean, the U.S., right? You're talking about the U.S. and how they can't, the Democrats and Republicans can't agree on a new funding bill for Ukraine, right? Is that what you're talking about, Ben?
They dropped this guy, and Zelensky was supposed to address Congress or the House of Representatives. I don't know my American pillars of power.
So he's really
but he
been
didn't
cut
even
off.
show. He didn't even show. He sent his minions, Yermak and those guys, who said, yeah, we have a plan for 2024. We went through 2 defenses. Just give us the money. And they said, no, I think 60 people were needed. And they got like 49 votes to send this money there. And it's just not, they probably, the 13th of December, that's the last time that US can get money. And that's not a lot of time left, mate. So it's been hung out to dry. Everybody knows they lost. There was this 2-piece thing in the Washington Post that came out, very long articles about how the counteroffensive failed. And it's the fucking blame game. They blame the Ukrainian leadership, the Ukrainian soldiers, the Ukrainians blame the West for 40.
You're going to tell me that those leaders Zelensky arrested for corruption weren't sent to house arrest in their mansions? I doubt they actually went to a jail. I mean, this is all just symbolic,
Of course it is. I mean, the latest guy was his main negotiator in last year's peace things, where he outed that it was Boris Johnson who stopped the peace negotiations. He's under investigation for, check this out, Ukrainian Hamas weapons deals. That was from the BBC.
I didn't realize that was.
I predicted this. I said these weapons are going to end up in the Middle East. There's no accountability. It's exactly what happened. Isn't that ironic?
But that's not why he's under investigation.
The allies of the United States who are backing Zelensky, those same weapons that the United States sent.
Yeah, but
that's what happens when there's no accountability.
The yellow blue flag people on Twitter and in the world, they're saying, Jesus, the US isn't such a reliable ally. Europe should take note. Jesus, we're in the deep shit. I thought we could trust these guys. And I'm just going to show you, this is just a still fucking picture that came out about 3 months difference.
The United States tried to blame Ukraine for blowing up the German pipeline. The Russian-German pipeline.
This is the Telegraph in the
Ukraine's
UK.
like, we didn't do it. The U.S. did it. It's so obvious. And then the Germans are so sellout, they let the United States get away with it.
They've committed harakiri. They're committed economic suicide. But this is the current fucking... Putin is close to victory. Europe should be terrified because Ukraine's time is running out. The danger is that the EU faces the same fate as the Holy Roman Empire. That's a headline that came out in the Telegraph. That's from the UK. That's how they feel. Like,
yeah, the Holy Roman Empire, which Germany, mostly was Germany today, that fell, and it looks like the EU is going to fall because they have no leg to stand on. They're basically not even servants anymore. They're just slaves of the U.S. empire, where the U.S. can go in and blow up their pipeline and nothing's done about it, and everybody knows.
And they're out of shit. Do you know how many shells there was the recent German aid to Ukraine, military aid? How do you say this? 1750. That's, they went from 20,000 one day to about 4,000 one day. So that's what, less than half a day's worth. That's what the Germans are sending, while they have record amount of firms going bankrupt.
Dima was showing a video of how they took a regular bus or a van to the front lines to drop off some artillery, and there was like 3 shells in it.
Yeah, I saw it.
Nothing like Germans sending tanks to support Nazis.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what it was.
With the Balkenkreuz, the Iron Cross on the side, just like 70-something years ago. Amazing. And they believed it, what Europe is feeling is we were promised that Russia would be destroyed. There would be a Maidan Moscow. We would get all the resources. It would be torn to shreds and everything would be ours. And now it's winter. We got snow. Most of the gas prices in Europe have skyrocketed. Hungary's the cheapest, but still not for free, And now we're in the deep, deep shitter.
And
that's what happened to Europe.
Recently, I learned this from you, Ben. Arestovich, he had that interview where he essentially admitted, we fucked up. We picked the wrong side.
I put it
on.
Right
back, by the way. I'm just going to grab a glass of water.
Okay, no problem, Alex.
I could put that on, but we have to read some subtitles. But that is amazingly telling. But basically, what he said, there's when we picked a side between what he calls the globalists and the realists, we picked the wrong side. We shed blood on the losing side. That's amazing.
Even the subtitles were kind of difficult to get his meaning, but yeah, that was essentially it, right? So
he's still, allegedly in Kiev, but we're talking about one of the main friends, the main advisors to Zelensky. Not long ago, he was dismissed. And he's talking like this, probably vying for power, but still.
Because they picked the side of the ideologues that, thought anything was possible because we're the U.S., hubristic-filled ideologues thinking, we'll make the ruble rubble, Russia's weak. We'll teach them. And, that was the idealists. And the realists knew better.
90s action movies, baby. The B-2 bombers, the aircraft carriers, they're all going to fly in, Screaming Eagle. And
we've watched Red Dawn. We know they don't have a chance against us.
That's what they thought. What's amazing is even Orban is coming around to it. He made recent statement that America is very good at not spelling out its interest, but coating it and saying it's universal values that that America wants to achieve, and that's how it tricks the world. I was not expecting that from someone like Orban, who, I was kind of glad he's in charge during the Ukraine conflict, but now he's gone full Zionist, unfortunately.
Let me tell you something about Red Dawn. If there was a land invasion of a foreign country, of this country, I'd be working with people I wouldn't be caught dead with. I'd be fighting alongside people that I violently oppose politically, but we'd all be part of a national movement to resist a foreign occupier.
I'd be the same in Hungary.
That's exactly what happened in Lebanon. In Lebanon, 90% of the population suddenly backed to Hezbollah, because they were the only ones fighting the Israelis that were encroaching there. The Lebanese army had orders not to fight. And when did the Israelis back out? Because the Israelis are cowards. They're not used to ground warfare. They're used to bombing children and babies. But the Israelis backed out when when the president of Lebanon said, we're going to send in the army now to back up Hezbollah if this continues. The next day, the Israelis were out. That's why I said I know if Sisi actually acted like a man and said, we're going to send those vans in unless you want war with us, Netanyahu would back off, because that's what bullies do. Bullies are cowards. Yeah. Okay. When you actually stand up to that bully, they're going to back off. So Israel is not invincible. It's a small country, has a powerful military, it has powerful backers. But guess what? There might even come a point where the United States abandons Israel. Absolutely. Look at the history. The United States has no allies, only interests. They back off the people that they supported prior. I mean, there's a long list of people the United States betrayed, right?
Yeah. Noriega, it's growing every day.
Osama bin Laden. These were so-called clients of the United States and later turned into enemies. Who's to say that the United States will have enough if Netanyahu keeps acting in this lawless way? And he has a corruption scandal of his own that could result in him going to jail. He could be ousted from power. But then who's going to take over after Netanyahu?
True, that trial has resumed, which is interesting. We thought it wouldn't resume until after wartime, but they resumed the corruption trial of Netanyahu. So there's a real possibility.
And it's kind of impossible to know because of the fog of war, but I would like to think that these reports are true, where it's not going so well for the IDF. I shouldn't call them the IDF, and their occupation of Gaza.
Yeah, IOF, yeah.
But, I mean, it's impossible to know. But, I mean, I see stories of, that that Hamas is just taking it to him, kind of, popping out of the tunnels and really giving him a tough time. And so, I mean, I like to believe that's true, but it's
we've
really
never
impossible.
seen
Netanyahu's nephew was killed. Did you know that? Netanyahu's nephew went into Gaza and was killed by a Hamas sniper.
Wow.
Netanyahu was so
You know
arrogant,
what's-
he thought, "Oh, I'll send my nephew and he'll be fine. We're so invincible." Then he got shot like in the first days of the invasion.
Yep, and I think the guy whose daddy authored the Hannibal Doctrine, meaning someone who's captured should be just mowed down because if they could talk.
Yeah,
or
they kill their
could
own
come back.
people. That's what Israel does.
Yeah, his son just got KO'd. So
Oh, that's
amazing.
ironic. The guy who came up with the Hannibal Directive?
Yep, I think that's
And that was in Gaza or Lebanon?
Yesterday or today, Gaza.
Wow.
But what I wanted to say now, I lost my train of thought. This is the first conflict. We see daily videos, just like from Ukraine. If you watch Telegram or even X, somewhat, people popping up from the underground, taking a fucking shell by hand, placing it on a tank, retreating and blowing the fucking thing up. We haven't seen that, and we haven't seen the enormous backlash in. They're trying to silence people everywhere from America.
By the way, there's socialist militias in Gaza as well. It's not just Hamas. But let me tell you, Hamas, like any other
There's no PLFP
guerrilla
anymore.
force, all you have to do is read Guerrilla Warfare by Che. They have no command center. A guerrilla force has no command center. It's not a question of is there a command center under Al-Shifa Hospital. There is no command center. But people are following this BS narrative from the bourgeois press that, we have to look for the command center. The hostages must be there. They don't care about the hostages. They've already killed their own people in Israel and within Gaza itself. This is not about the hostages, not even about Hamas. It's about ethnic cleansing to push the Palestinians out because they have ulterior motives, probably want to bring back the Ben Gurion Canal. That's what's going on.
Yeah, and it's not just one monolithic organization as well. There's Hamas, there's PIJ, there's the Quds Brigades. They are one of the most public, and obviously then there's the foreign forces. But the backlash is, these massive gatherings, even in Europe, even in America, which, 95%, I think John Mersheimer said, that were in support of Palestine, maybe 5% in support of Israel. There's a massive public backlash. They're trying to silence it, because Congress recently passed that being anti-Zionist equals anti-Semitic.
And guess what? They shut down Jewish Voice for Peace, one of the most prominent anti-war clubs at Columbia University, one of the top Ivy League colleges in the country in New York. How is that not an anti-Semitic act? What they're doing is promoting anti-Semitism. To say the anti-Zionist Jews, that all Jews must support everything Israel does, that provokes anti-Semitic acts.
But just imagine the deep shit they're in if they resort to this kind of gag orders and silencing. They know the media warfare has been lost.
By the way, Rashida Tlaib, I hate to say this because she was censored recently, but even Rashida Tlaib went along with the vote. She voted absent. It was only one guy, Macy, one Republican, that voted, that said, okay, I'm not going to say that if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic. Everybody else voted for it. So those that say Israel no longer has strong influence in the Congress, they do for things like this.
Yeah. Anybody know this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Anybody know the story of why the what is it called? AIPAC isn't registered as a foreign agent under the FARA thing, which has been
They're trying to say the Huru 3 are Russian agents because they didn't register because their leadership went to Moscow once, right? But AIPAC, who gives billions of dollars to our politicians, including Democrats that voted to censor Rashida Tlaib, they got huge sums of money from AIPAC, bribes. They don't have to register as a foreign agent of Israel. But the Huru 3, for going to different countries in solidarity with the African liberation in the U.S. empire, oh no, they're Russian agents. It's ridiculous.
So is RT for some reason, but not AIPAC. I just wonder how they maneuvered that.
I've been on RT. I'm proud to have been on RT. The show is gone forever because they shut RT down. I was only able to recover the audio, not the video. But it's censorship. Because what's the saying go? The first casualty of war is truth.
Yeah.
So this censorship is trying to deceive the masses, keep the truth away. But the masses are waking up. And what did Orwell say? Speaking the truth in a world of universal lies is a revolutionary act. It shouldn't be considered controversial, but now you're saying certain truths. That's radical. Because people are so used to the lies, but they're starting to wake up.
Yeah, he did that while criticizing the fucking Soviet Union. He said that's a great
handing
act.
lists of.
He was no fan of Stalin, and he was probably too close to the British establishment. I'm not saying Orwell was a saint, but he said some things that had some truth. I quoted Henry Kissinger earlier. You're not going to see me defend Henry Kissinger, but he said some things that were true too.
Yeah, there's an interesting anecdote about AIPAC. Somebody was sitting down with an AIPAC lobbyist, and that lobbyist bragged and said, today I could have 75 senators sign this napkin. it doesn't even matter what the policy is or what it's about. They'll just sign it. That's how powerful we are. So
They're bragging about it.
It's the Zionist lobby is definitely strong. Shoot, I had one other very interesting thing to say. I was super interesting. I just don't remember what it was.
We lose our train of thought today, but yeah, Netanyahu.
I wasn't the only one.
Netanyahu said the same before this war. He said, "But we got 80% approval in the United States, no matter what we do." That's you can take that as paraphrasing, but almost a literal. Yeah.
Hopefully, that's all changing. I mean, it needs to change.
You have 20,000 dead now in Gaza. Unprecedented numbers. The massacres of 1948, they displaced about 800,000 Palestinians. There wasn't even that deaths in that Nakba. So when somebody said, "Oh, that was just rhetoric," that cabinet member said they want a second Nakba. They've already killed more than what they did in 48.
Yeah,
mostly civilians.
I know what I wanted to focus on, but we are running long. We're at an hour and 16 minutes. But I did want to kind of spend a little bit of time on this idea that we're going to have a Congress is going to somehow pass some legislation that tells us that if we oppose an apartheid, racist government, that we are irrational people who have this irrational hatred or phobia of the Jewish religion.
You know who hates Jews more than anybody? Evangelical Christians, evangelical Zionists. They want Jews to burn in hell. They think there's got to be World War III, the end of war, the end of the world in the Middle East, and then they'll be able to ascend to heaven, and the Jews will burn in hell. That's what a Zionist is.
The Christian part of Europe, the Visegrad Four, has the same issue, unfortunately. They're staunch Zionists. But we didn't pass a law like that, for fuck's sake.
But how is a government going to think that they can pass? Is it legislation, or is it just an affirmation? It's just they're patting themselves on the back, reaffirming within themselves that, hey, anybody out there that doesn't like our Zionist proxy, we're going to say they're really bad. We're going to call them immoral.
And also the laws against BDS. So they're forcing you, and there's Republicans that support this. They say they don't like government encroachment on our rights. But when it comes to Israel, all of a sudden their principles go out the window. They're like, no, we're going to force you to do business with Israel. You can't be part of BDS. You can't boycott. It's insanity.
So that's the reality. I mean, ultimately, they do not have principles. Ultimately, when things get down to the brass tacks, there's one principle, and it's the bourgeoisie maintaining their control of the system. I mean, that's it. That's their primary concern and care, and no other principles matter. And we see that in these times of crisis, because the hypocrisy and their principles go out the fucking window in a hugely transparent way. And of course, that's what communists have been saying for 100 years now. So
that's the good news of this. We are the human rights, democracy loving, freedom loving America. That died. That died in the rubble with Gaza. No one in the world believes that anymore. Not a serious country.
World opinion polls show not only that the majority of the world thinks the United States is a threat to world peace, but it's the biggest preventer of democracy in the world. So the United States is not only not seen as a beacon of democracy anymore, it's seen as a menace to democracy in the world.
But as long as the poors are disenfranchised, it doesn't matter what they think, Alex. They can think whatever the fuck they want, as long as they're disenfranchised. But no, that's the perspective of the empire.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's true. Yeah.
I just want to see if you want your blood to boil, the supreme fucking hypocrisy here.
When the ICC investigates Israel for fake war crimes, this is pure anti-Semitism. The court established to prevent atrocities like the Nazi Holocaust against the Jewish people is now targeting the one state of the Jewish people. First, it outrageously claims that when Jews live in our homeland, this is a war crime. Second, it claims that when democratic Israel defends itself against terrorists who murder our children, rocket our cities, we're committing another war crime. Yet the ICC refuses to investigate brutal dictatorships like Iran and Syria.
There you go.
Who commit horrific atrocities almost daily. As Prime Minister of Israel, I assure you, we will fight this perversion of justice with all our might.
Wow.
You just got to look at his eyes.
Syria, but he's losing the plot.
You just got to look at his eyes. This guy has no soul. And he's said recently Hitler wasn't so bad. He said, oh, Hitler wasn't so bad. Hamas is much worse. So now they're downplaying the Holocaust or using the Holocaust to justify massacring people. There's nothing
always hiding.
That's why you have people like Norm Finkelstein, who I've met a couple of occasions, coming out, who's the son of Holocaust survivors, and saying that, you know, they're using the tragedy of his family to justify this. He's indignant. And even Candace Owens spoke to him. There's even people on the right that are speaking to Finkelstein now. And he must be enraged as well that him, an anti-Zionist Jew, that they're saying he's anti-Semitic. His parents were survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It's ridiculous.
Gabor Mate, the father of Aaron Mate, you know, the famous...
he's a Holocaust survivor too.
And he says the same. It's outrageous that they go under the skirt of the Holocaust. They always hide behind it. That's the strategy. He was his second sentence, this guy.
And,
I mean, that was
here's the guy, Netanyahu,
industry,
who worked with Hamas to leverage against the PLO at the time, I believe.
In the 80s,
and thought he could, and they thought that they could work with Hamas. And so he brings this on himself. And you almost get the feeling sometimes that he intended for Hamas to attack, because information has come out that the Israelis knew about this attack being planned a year ago.
They underestimated the Palestinians because of their arrogance, but they did get warnings from Egypt, I believe. If Sisi's such a sellout, of course, if Sisi got word that Hamas were going to do this, he would let his masters in Israel know.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of division about the analysis there, and I agree with Alex for sure. Like, I think, you know, it was Israeli arrogance. They might have got some warnings that they ignored, but I don't think it was like a planned false flag operation in order to justify what's going on. That's too much for me to.
False flags happen, but I don't think it was this time.
I'm just saying it's very convenient. First of all, Netanyahu thinks he can remain in power when tens of thousands of people were in the streets to oust him before that for wanting to change the Constitution so that he would be basically unconvictable of his crimes.
Yeah.
So it's just that it's very, very convenient.
But if anything, he's less popular with this war going on than more popular, because people are seeing it as a security failure.
Yeah, I think it might have backfired largely on him. Yeah.
He's definitely trying to exploit the crisis for his benefit, but can he? I mean, I don't think so. And it depends.
By the way, they sent helicopters to the music festival where most of the civilians died because they were targeting military installations, Hamas, more than anything. But they sent helicopters. We've seen the footage now, right? Mint Press did an excellent analysis of that. They've interviewed me before. But so they got an immediate response by killing their own people, then didn't send any ground people to go save the people for several hours. I mean, this is, if anything, gross negligence.
Yeah, there was Apache helicopters. They mowed everyone down, like the cars of they call them revelers, the the festival goers.
By the way, what decent human being, knowing what Gaza's going through, would go and party on the border and drink or do drugs and like F you, Gaza, we're here partying. You can't come over here. Like, they're acting like, oh, these terrible victims, they were.
It happens all the time, though.
Yeah, it's just the way the media is manipulating it. And then, of course, most of the people that were gunned down were probably gunned down by the Apache helicopter. That was Israeli.
Or the tanks. You've probably seen the short interview with the tank
houses where they were held to.
Yeah, in Kibbutz Be'eri. Yeah.
But to carry the analogy, or whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of money also being made with this, and Netanyahu doesn't have to be the only cynic that sees that and would support that. I mean, we're talking about the canal, and the canal also will be onshore with the Leviathan, the huge amount of oil that's off the border of Gaza and Israel, and also Lebanon and Syria. So the plan, I've read this several times, is that Haifa will be the only port left available for receiving and processing and sending the oil from the Leviathan
and gas.
It's very, very.
The majority of the Haifa residents.
We talk cynicism. We talk about what these people are capable of on every show, and it seems to be anything. So when there's something like this, I think it's to a certain point, it ultimately can't be discounted. I mean, you read a book like David Talbot's book on Alan Dulles. My God, some of the heinous things that he and the CIA did are just beyond the pale.
Yeah,
Just
sociopath.
beyond
I
the
was gonna mention Haifa. It's interesting because the majority of Haifa residents are Arabs, and Arab Christians that live in Israel are actually also drafted into the military and are heavily indoctrinated. And they put this mentality that they're not actually Palestinian and that they're different from the Muslim. So you see a lot of Christian Muslim unity in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, in Gaza. Right, their churches are being bombed as well or attacked. But unfortunately, there's this divide and conquer that we mentioned earlier that the Zionist colonizers are very aware of how to use. So unfortunately, a lot of these Arabs in opinion polls have opposed the ceasefire.
Yeah, I'm with.
Yeah.
I completely agree. That's the methodology. But when you talk about, I mean, IMEC, which was the India, Middle East, European Energy Corridor, I think that was put with a red marker at the UN by Netanyahu. It was put there, and that is a direct competitor to the Belt and Road Initiative, the International North-South Transport Corridor, ITI. You mentioned Richard Medhurst. He analyzes this fantastically. Another one to pay attention to is Pepe Escobar. He writes about this prolifically. And
I
that's
believe
the
he just
background.
returned to X Twitter. Pepe Escobar, he was censored for a while, but he's returned.
He has? I'll be happy to see him again. But yeah, great.
I can't believe they censored him. He's so uncontroversial. He doesn't say anything. I mean, he tells you like it is, but he's not being inflammatory. That's ridiculous that he was ever censored off Twitter.
Well, anybody that they perceive as pro-Russia, this was before Elon, by the way, but anybody they perceive as pro-Russia on Twitter, they tried to censor them one way or another once they got a big following.
I knew he was off Facebook for a while, but I've been off as well. I thought he was still
Facebook censors more than Twitter does currently.
Way
that I'm
more.
aware of. I'm banned from Facebook.
Good on you.
Well, we are broadcasting this live on my Facebook page and then also YouTube and on X. But guys, I really appreciate this discussion. We're at about an hour and a half. Alex, thank you for coming by, sharing your expertise. It was a great discussion. We're definitely going to have you back as events unfold, but it's an exciting time to be alive for sure. I mean, there's momentous changes.
Yeah, I'm glad to have come back on. It's been a while. It was refreshing talking with you, gentlemen.
Well, for me, I hope I'm still alive when you come back.
Oh, me too, Carlo. Me too.
Me too.
Good talk to you guys.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Yeah. See you next time. We'll be back
Take
on
care.
Tuesday for episode 38.